All right, happy Bobby Bonilla Day, everyone. This has to be one of my favorite days in baseball, and I really didn't want to have to add my own editing in this podcast, but before it starts, I really think I need to jump in with a warning because this is going to get called out in the comments if I don't. The podcast is completely AI generated, and they mispronounce his last name every time. I tried to add in a phonetic spelling a couple times, but it doesn't want to work. So you're just going to have to deal with it. Enjoy.
Welcome, everyone. Today we're doing a deep dive into, one of baseball's most talked about and honestly pretty unusual financial deals.
That's right.
We're unpacking the whole story behind Bobby Bonilla Day and looking at this wider world of deferred player payments in Major League Baseball.
A fascinating area.
Our mission today is really to dig into the facts, the key people involved, and what these really unique contracts actually mean. We're pulling from some great reporting by CNN, ESPN, the Indy Star.
Good sources.
So here's the thing that grabs you immediately.
Yeah.
Imagine getting paid almost $1.2 million every year for decades, and you're not even playing baseball anymore. That's where it starts to get really interesting.
Yeah, July 1st, it's become this almost legendary date in sports, hasn't it? Specifically because, that's the day the New York Mets cut that check for $11,193,248.26 to Bobby Bonilla.
And the timeline on this is it's kind of mind-boggling. These payments started way back in 2011, and they keep going until 2035. I mean, think about that. Bonilla's going to be 72 years old when the last payment comes through. It's like a generational thing.
It really is. And the total amount is staggering.
Right. What is it, $29.8 million?
Yeah, $29.8 million total. For a guy who, last played for the Mets in '99, he retired completely in 2001 with the Cardinals.
So the immediate question is just how? How on earth did a deal like this come together?
Well, yeah, it's a pretty wild story. It really starts with the Mets having a fairly simple problem, actually. They just wanted to move on from Bonilla after the '99 season.
Right.
He still had about $6 million left on his contract, and they needed to figure out how to handle that.
A standard buyout situation, you'd think.
Yeah.
But this is where it gets really weird, because the key figures involved were Fred Wilpon, the Mets owner at the time, and Bernie Madoff.
The Bernie Madoff.
Exactly. So Wilpon, he thought he was getting these incredible returns on investments he had with Madoff.
Right. He was heavily invested.
So his thinking was basically, why pay Bonilla the $6 million now? I can defer it, keep the money invested with Madoff, make a huge profit, and then pay Bonilla later. He chose to defer the payments, thinking that money was essentially growing in what turned out to be Madoff's giant Ponzi scheme.
And that's what's just fascinating, kind of horrifying, right? You have this Major League sports contract tangled up with one of the biggest financial frauds ever. Just to clarify for anyone listening, a Ponzi scheme, it's fraud. You use money from new investors to pay off the earlier ones. It looks successful, but it's unsustainable. It always collapses.
Yeah, and Madoff's was massive. Billions of dollars ran for decades. He died in prison, in 2021, serving 150 years?
Exactly. So it really raises huge questions about due diligence, risk assessment. Even in these high-stakes deals, the promise of easy money, those huge returns, it can really blind people. It's a lesson that goes way beyond sports.
So Wilpon was kind of a victim, too, in a way, thinking he was making this smart financial move, deferring the payment, but he was actually just caught deeper in Madoff's scam.
Pretty much, yeah.
Meanwhile, you've got Bonilla's agent, Dennis Gilbert, who apparently played this perfectly. He negotiated an 8% annual interest rate on that deferred $6 million.
8%. That's the key number.
That 8% compounding every year, that's what turned the $6 million into these, almost $1.2 million annual checks we see today. It's just, wow, the power of compound interest, right? Even in these bizarre circumstances.
Absolutely. It's a textbook example, really. And, while Bonilla's deal gets all the attention, it's important to remember deferred payments themselves, they're not that unusual in baseball.
Right, okay. So it wasn't just some crazy Mets one-off thing.
No, not at all. It's actually a pretty common practice, and it has roots going back quite a ways.
So where did this idea even come from, paying players later?
Well, you can kind of trace it back to something called the Dolgoff Plan from the 1960s. There was an accountant, Ralph Dolgoff. Okay.
And he popularized this idea for the ABA, the American Basketball Association. They were the upstart league, trying to compete with the NBA, right? So they needed a way to lure players without maybe having all the cash up front. Offering deals structured with long-term payments, spreading it out, gave players security, and let the ABA compete. It was Kind of clever financial engineering, really.
That makes sense, a way to compete. And so that idea just kind of migrated over to baseball and stuck around.
Yeah, it evolved over time, absolutely. Yeah. And once you start looking, you see these deferred deals all over MLB.
Okay, so give us some other big examples. Besides Bonilla, who else has these kinds of long-term payouts?
Well, funny enough, Bobby Bonilla himself has another one.
Get out. Seriously.
Yep. A second deal, this one involving the Mets and the Orioles, it pays him $500,000 a year for 25 years. That one started back in 2004, so it runs through 2028.
Wait. So Bobby Bonilla gets 2 separate checks every year for contracts from decades ago.
Correct. 2 separate deferred payment streams. That's amazing. Really shows how long these things last.
It does. And interestingly, his main famous deal, it was actually inspired by another Mets deal, Brett Saberhagen.
Saberhagen, right.
He gets $250,000 a year from the Mets, also for 25 years, also started in 2004. Yeah. But okay, moving to more current big names, Max Scherzer.
Yeah, Scherzer.
He's getting a total of $105 million deferred from the Nationals, stretched out through 2028. He actually just got a $15 million payment this July 1st, 2025.
Okay, wow. And Manny Ramirez, too, right? He's still getting paid by the Red Sox.
Yep. Manny's collecting $24.2 million total through 2026. Got $2 million this July 1st. That stems from I think it was a $32 million agreement originally.
But maybe the biggest one right now, the one that feels kind of Bonilla-esque in scale, is Chris Davis with the Orioles.
Oh, the Chris Davis contract. Yeah, that's a huge one. He's getting $59 million in deferred money over 15 years.
15 years.
Yeah, it started just last year, 2024, and runs all the way to 2037. He got $9.16 million in 24, another $9.16 million this year, 2025. The amounts get smaller, but yeah, he's still owed $40 million through 2037.
$40 million still to come. It's just incredible. And it's not just these big buyouts anymore, is it? You mentioned something about like a cultural impact.
Yeah, this is pretty fun. So Christian Yelich's agent, Joe Longo, he specifically negotiated a July 1st deferred payment date for Yelich, basically as an homage to Bobby Bonilla Day.
Seriously, in honor of Bonilla Day.
Yep. Yelich gets nearly $2.5 million a year from 2031 to 2042. And apparently Longo even called Dennis Gilbert, Bonilla's agent, and said, hey, this one's in your honor. Gilbert was reportedly thrilled.
Huh. That's brilliant. So it's become like part of the baseball financial landscape, a known strategy.
Exactly. And if you look at the bigger picture, you see these deferred deals aren't just about, getting rid of a player or ducking immediate payroll hits. They can be really strategic. For the player, it's long-term security. For the team, it can mean payroll flexibility, maybe easing the burden for the competitive balance tax, the luxury tax.
Right.
Which brings us perfectly to maybe the biggest deferral deal ever, certainly the most talked about recently, Shohei Ohtani.
Yes. The Ohtani contract, it's like the ultimate evolution of this whole concept, isn't it? Compared to Bonilla's situation.
Totally different context, yeah.
We're talking his massive 10-year, $700 million deal with the Dodgers. But the crazy part is how much is deferred.
It's almost all of it. He deferred $68 million out of his $70 million annual salary.
So for the 10 years he's actually playing under the contract, he only gets $2 million a year.
That's right. Just $2 million annually during the deal. The huge chunk, the $680 million, that doesn't even start getting paid out until 2034. Then he gets $68 million a year until 2043.
And this is the key difference, right? Bonilla was a buyout. He was underperforming. The team wanted him gone, and it got caught up in the Madoff mess. Ohtani. This was his idea.
Exactly. Proposed by him and his team as arguably the biggest free agent ever, right at his peak. It wasn't a reaction, it was a proactive strategy.
And the benefit for the Dodgers is huge. Massive payroll flexibility right now lets them build a better team around him without instantly blowing past the luxury tax thresholds.
And it helps with the competitive balance tax, too, because the present-day value of the contract is what counts for CBT payroll calculations. Deferring so much money lowers that present-day value significantly.
So it's gone from like a financial problem solver to a sophisticated strategic tool for superstars and teams alike.
It really shows how these things have evolved, absolutely. It's a whole different ballgame now, pardon the pun.
Yeah. And okay, maybe the most striking, almost funny part of Bobby Bonilla Day every year is comparing his paycheck to what some of the current young stars are making.
Oh yeah, that contrast is pretty stark.
His $1.19 million compared to guys who are actually producing right now.
It's pretty wild. Take Pete Crow Armstrong, for instance. Having a great year, about 3.9 WAR wins above replacement, a key value stat. He's making around $771,000 this year.
Less than Bonilla.
Way less. James Wood, another top prospect producing, 3.5 WAR, around $764,600. Paul Skeens, the pitching phenom, $875,000, maybe 3.4 WAR. These guys are on their initial lower-paying contracts.
And the list goes on, right? Riley Green,
about 3.0 WAR, making around $812,400. Hunter Brown, similar WAR, around $807,400. Andy Page's 2.9 WAR, $770,000. Jacob Wilson, maybe 2.8 WAR, $760,000.
So all these young guys contributing significantly on the field today are earning less than Bonilla gets for games he played, what, over 20 years ago?
Yeah. It definitely makes you think. Maybe some of those young players look at July 1st and think, maybe someday.
You wonder.
But seriously, it does raise this interesting question about how we value things in sports, right?
Yeah.
Past performance versus current potential. And just the incredibly long financial shadow these contracts can cast.
These long-tail commitments, yeah. How decisions made way back when under totally different circumstances are still playing out financially today. It creates these really weird, fascinating financial legacies.
Couldn't have said it better.
So there you have it. That's the journey. From a Mets buyout tangled up with Bernie Madoff to this annual, almost celebrated quirk of the calendar, and now even influencing how modern superstars like Ohtani structure their mega deals.
It's way more than just a funny meme day.
Absolutely. It's really a window into the complex, sometimes baffling, but always interesting world of how money works in professional sports.
Yeah, it tells you a lot about the economics of baseball.
Definitely. So maybe something to chew on as you go about your day. Think about how long-term deals, not just in sports, but maybe in any industry, how their structure can create these totally unforeseen consequences, these strange financial realities decades later. What other deals out there, things that seem simple now, might have these hidden complexities, these long-term ripple effects we just don't see coming.